Game Development Explained. No theory, just what works.
So I want you to picture this. It is 2015, and you are just scrolling around online, and you stumble onto a YouTube channel called Unfavorable Semicircle.
Oh, I remember this. Just an absolute avalanche of bizarre content.
Right. An avalanche is like the perfect word for it. They just started uploading videos at this completely unnatural rate.
Tens of thousands of them.
Tens of thousands. And we are not talking about, somebody's daily vlog or a music video. If you clicked on one of these, you might literally just see a single blinking pixel on a pitch black screen.
Which is deeply unsettling on its own.
Oh, absolutely. Or you click another one and it is just this flat, muddy, brown screen. And the audio was even worse.
Yeah, the audio was genuinely jarring.
Like heavily distorted fragments of sound, or sometimes this weird synthetic voice just reciting a string of letters. And the titles were just these random, meaningless combinations of numbers and symbols.
Some of them were hours long, and some were literally just a fraction of a second.
Yeah. It made no sense. Within a very short window, this one account just dumped all these completely baffling videos onto the platform.
When you encounter something like that in the wild, the human brain instantly tries to categorize it as a systemic failure.
Because it just looks like garbage.
Exactly. The immediate consensus across the internet back then was that Unfavorable Semicircle was simply a broken bot. People assumed a piece of code had just gone completely rogue. Or, perhaps it was a crude algorithmic test meant to game the recommendation engine.
Just flooding the zone with micro content.
Right, because when a system presents you with tens of thousands of fragmented, incomprehensible pieces of data, assuming it's just digital garbage is like the most logical survival mechanism for our attention spans.
Totally. I mean, you look at a blinking pixel and you just assume somebody forgot a semicolon in their Python script and walked away from their computer.
Yeah, it's the easiest explanation. But the uploads didn't stop. They just kept coming.
They kept coming. And, we are bringing this up today because the documents we are diving into use this exact bizarre internet mystery to illustrate a really profound structural problem.
A problem that happens in the modern workplace all the time.
Yes. So our mission for this deep dive today is to explore how this exact phenomenon, where pure chaos is actually hiding a much grander structure, perfectly mirrors the daily, ground-level reality of massive, complex projects.
Specifically, we are going to be digging deep into the trenches of large-scale game development.
Right. We want to examine how the feeling of being completely lost in a multi-million-dollar software production is, functionally speaking, identical to staring at a single blinking pixel on a brown screen.
The parallel they draw in the source material is strikingly accurate. Game development takes that abstract feeling of corporate misalignment and just turns it up to a volume that is impossible to ignore.
It really does.
But to understand why the studio floor starts to look like a rogue YouTube channel, we really have to look at how that initial mystery was actually cracked.
Because the internet didn't just leave Unfavorable Semicircle alone, right? They didn't just accept it as a glitch.
Oh, not at all. You know how the internet is.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack this. Because the turning point in that story is really where the core metaphor of our deep dive takes root. Eventually, these communities on Reddit and Discord began doing what they do best, which is just hyperfixating on an anomaly.
They absolutely refused to let it go.
They stopped viewing these tens of thousands of videos as isolated, broken events. And dedicated users actually started writing custom scripts to mass download the channel's entire output.
Which is a huge undertaking.
Massive. And then they began ripping the videos apart frame by frame.
And that was the breakthrough. It happened when they started treating the videos not as individual pieces of media, but as raw data points in a much larger coordinate system.
Wait, explain how they did that exactly.
Well, when these users began digitally stitching together frames from hundreds of different seemingly unrelated uploads, the static began to shift. It wasn't just noise anymore. Yeah, when composited together in a massive grid, those blinking pixels and flat brown screens actually formed hidden compositions.
So it's intentional the whole time.
Exactly. Distinct, incredibly complex images and geometric structures emerged from the composite data. The creator of the channel hadn't just uploaded garbage.
They had a plan.
Right. They had taken a coherent image, shattered it into tens of thousands of microscopic temporal shards, and then just scattered them all across YouTube.
That is, just think about the psychological whiplash of that moment for the people analyzing it.
It must have been mind-blowing.
You spend weeks thinking you are staring into the digital abyss of a broken hard drive, and suddenly you realize you are looking at a deliberate, highly structured mosaic.
It changes everything.
I always picture this like standing in an art museum, right? Like you are inches away from a massive pointillist painting by Georges Seurat.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Right, because if your nose is practically touching the canvas, all you can process is meaningless color noise.
Just a dot of cyan here, a dot of magenta there.
Exactly. It looks completely arbitrary. But you take 10 steps back, and suddenly those isolated dots coalesce into this vibrant, structured scene of people lounging in a park. The actual dots of paint haven't changed at all. Literally nothing about the physical data is different. The only thing that changed was the distance and the context of the observer.
And that shift in perspective that establishes the foundational thesis of the research we are looking at today.
It really is the anchor for everything we're about to talk about.
It's a principle we need to keep in mind for everything that follows.
Right.
Fragmentation does not equate to the absence of structure.
Right. Just because it's broken into pieces doesn't mean it's broken.
Exactly. Breaking a cohesive system down into 1,000 disconnected tasks does not mean the overarching plan has ceased to exist. It simply means the structure has become invisible to any individual observer who is standing too close to their specific piece of the canvas.
So here's where it gets really interesting, because the author of our source document takes that exact realization, that shift from perceiving chaos to discovering a hidden picture, and applies it directly to the life cycle of a massive game project.
It translates surprisingly well.
They argue that as a game scales up, in scope and team size, a highly organized, coherent development process inevitably degrades.
It happens every single time.
And it doesn't necessarily break, but it degrades into this stream of entirely disconnected activities from the perspective of the individual developer.
Oh, anyone who has survived a major production cycle knows this feeling intimately.
The daily grind.
Right. The daily cadence of work never stops. Compilers are running, meetings are scheduled, digital assets are being checked into the repository.
The machine is just constantly humming.
The sheer volume of output is massive.
Yeah.
Yet the overall shape of what is actually being built becomes increasingly difficult for the people building it to perceive.
Which sounds so frustrating.
It is. The source material provides some painfully accurate, very specific scenarios of what this looks like for the individual disciplines out on the floor.
Yeah, let's actually bring this down to the desk level. The document outlines a few archetypal moments, and it starts with the programmer.
This is a classic example.
Imagine a senior engineer sitting down on a Tuesday morning. They log into Jira, or whatever task tracking software the studio happens to use.
Usually Jira.
Usually Jira, yeah. And they see a new critical ticket assigned to them. And the request is to completely refactor, essentially tear down and rewrite a core movement subsystem that was implemented and locked in 6 months ago.
And you have to realize 6 months is a geologic era in software development.
It's an eternity.
By the time that much calendar has passed, the foundational assumptions that drove the original code have been completely buried under layers of subsequent development.
So this programmer opens up the code environment. They look at the original logic. They weren't the one who wrote it, or maybe they were, but the context is just completely gone.
It looks like an alien language.
Yeah. So to them, the sudden demand from leadership to rip out a functioning system and rebuild it, it just looks entirely arbitrary.
It feels like an incredibly high-risk, low-reward task.
Exactly. Handed down by someone who clearly doesn't understand the cascading damage it might cause to the physics engine, right? To the programmer, that task ticket is just a blinking pixel. It makes absolutely no sense in isolation.
Then the source pivots to the designer's perspective, which is just as frustrating, but in a different way.
The design example is so good.
Right. So a game designer receives a directive from the creative director to tweak a core economic mechanic. Let's say how quickly a player earns a specific currency.
Okay.
The friction here is that this exact mechanic was debated, heavily balanced, and definitively approved 2 major milestones ago.
It's a done deal.
Exactly. The designer is now being told to change it, and the new values they're being asked to implement seem to violently contradict the previously established design pillars.
So they just feel like they're breaking their own game.
From their desk, the project appears to be flailing. It looks like leadership is just randomly changing their minds and destroying the game's balance.
Just another isolated frame of static.
Precisely.
And the most visceral example from the text, I think, focuses on the QA tester. Quality assurance is the frontline defense, right?
They see everything first.
Right. So they receive the newest Friday build of the game, they boot it up, and they immediately notice that a critical set of bugs regarding, say, character animations has been successfully fixed.
Huge win.
Huge win. But in the very same build, the inventory system, which has been stable for a year, is suddenly crashing the game every single time it's open.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
From the QA perspective, the development cycle looks like a tragic, endless loop. The project is literally breaking exactly as fast as it heals.
When we pull back and look at those three scenarios collectively, the true nature of the disease really reveals itself.
Because none of those people are wrong to be mad, right?
Well, that's the thing. Locally, at the individual level, every single one of those directives was completely rational to the person who issued it.
Wait, how is breaking the inventory rational?
Let's break it down. The lead engineer who requested the code refactor, they knew that an upcoming multiplayer feature was going to completely shatter the old movement system anyway.
Oh, so they were getting ahead of it.
Right. And the creative director who requested the design tweak, they were reacting to brand new data showing that player retention was dropping off a cliff.
So they had to fix the economy.
Exactly. The frustrating reality is that the logic actually exists. What has vanished is the connective tissue.
The shared understanding.
Yes. The visible structure that links the programmer's refactor, the designer's tweak, and the QA tester's broken build into a single evolving narrative is just gone.
Okay, I do want to push back on one element here, or at least ask for a little clarification.
Sure.
The feeling of being a small cog in a machine that doesn't make sense, that is a hallmark of practically every large corporate enterprise on Earth.
Oh, absolutely. It's universal.
Right. So why does our source argue that game development is uniquely susceptible to this specific brand of fragmentation? What makes building a video game more chaotic than building, say, a banking app or a logistics database?
It's a great question. The crucial difference is the sheer scale of massively parallel, distinct disciplines required to ship a modern game. And you combine that with the highly subjective nature of what they are actually building.
Because fun is subjective.
Exactly. Think about the variety of specialized languages being spoken simultaneously on a studio floor.
It's crazy.
You have back-end network engineers, conceptual artists, sound designers, narrative writers, user interface specialists, and gameplay scripters, all trying to build the same thing.
All at the exact same time.
Furthermore, you have external pressures layering on top of that. Marketing teams needing specific footage, publishers demanding vertical slices to prove the game works.
Oh, and the console platforms.
Right, platform holders like Sony or Microsoft imposing rigorous certification requirements just to launch on their hardware.
So they aren't just building different parts of a car on an assembly line. The parts are constantly changing shape while they're being built.
That is the amplifier effect right there. Each of these disciplines operates on its own internal timeline.
What do you mean by internal timeline?
Well, an environment artist might spend 3 whole weeks sculpting a single room, but a programmer might iterate on a camera system 5 times in a single afternoon.
Right. The speeds don't match up.
Yet, they are all working in the exact same shared digital space. So they are constantly indirectly destroying and recreating each other's context.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, let's say a writer decides to change a character's backstory, just a small lore change.
It seems harmless.
Right. But that means the voice actor needs to re-record a line, which means the audio engineer has to adjust the mixing, which means the animator has to resync the facial capture, which means the programmer has to adjust the timing of the cutscene trigger.
Wow. Just from one backstory change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This massive web of indirect influence means that the shared context of why things are happening degrades at an astonishing rate.
I am picturing an orchestra. Right. But instead of everyone sitting on a stage watching a single conductor, the string section is in a basement, the brass section is in an attic, the percussionists are in a completely different building.
And they can't hear each other.
Right. And the only way they can coordinate the symphony is by sliding sticky notes under each other's doors.
A remarkably apt visual, truly. And it actually leads directly into the next major concept from the source material.
Where do all the sticky notes go?
Exactly, because all of those sticky notes, every feature request, every bug report, every design tweak from all of those different disciplines, they have to go somewhere.
They don't just evaporate.
They accumulate in the project's backlog.
And this brings us to what might actually be my favorite metaphor in the entire document. The author describes how, over the lifespan of a multi-year project, the backlog stops functioning as a clean, linear to-do list.
It really does.
Instead, it slowly petrifies into what they call an archaeological site.
It is such a brilliant way to describe the decay of project management. As a game scales, the database of tasks literally stratifies.
Like rock layers.
Yes, it begins to accumulate work generated from entirely different eras of the game's existence, mixing them all together into a single overwhelming pile.
Okay, let's grab our shovels and actually dig through these layers. What exactly are we finding in this excavation site of a backlog?
Well, if you dig down to the bedrock of the database, the absolute bottom, you will find tasks generated during the earliest prototype phases.
From like 3 years ago.
Right. These are usually wild, highly experimental features that were brainstormed, partially implemented, and then just abandoned. But crucially, they were never formally deleted.
They just sit there forever.
Move a layer up and you hit the vertical slice era.
Ah, the vertical slice.
This is usually a period of intense crunch where the team is forced to polish a tiny 10-minute section of the game to an absurd degree, usually just to secure funding or publisher approval.
So you have hyper-polished fake tasks sitting right next to half-baked experimental tasks in the exact same list.
Exactly. Moving further up the pile, you encounter the strata of early playtest feedback. Hundreds of tickets reacting to how external users stumbled through the game.
Which is usually brutal.
Always. And then above that, you have a dense layer of publisher notes and executive mandates. And finally, sitting at the very top, the most recent deposits.
The panic phase.
Yes, a frantic scramble of technical requirements needed to pass platform certification so the game can actually be legally sold on a digital storefront.
So you essentially have 5 completely different versions of the game's priorities, all sitting in the same database, demanding attention at the same time.
It is chaos.
But let me challenge the premise of the source for a second.
Go for it.
If I am a developer and I am assigned a task that looks weird or outdated, shouldn't I just be able to read the description in the tracking software? Like, is it really an archaeological mystery, or is it just a team being lazy about writing good ticket notes?
It's so tempting to blame it on administrative laziness. But the source provides a fantastic narrative showing why the erosion of context is far more insidious than just a poorly written Jura ticket.
Okay, walk me through it.
They trace the hypothetical lifespan of a single core feature to prove the point. Imagine a feature is designed on day 1. It's built to support the central defining pillar of the game's original vision.
The main selling point.
Right. The documentation is pristine, the entire studio understands it and agrees on it.
Okay, we have a perfectly documented, universally understood starting point. Sounds great.
Fast forward. 6 months pass. The studio brings in external playtesters for the first time. The data comes back, and it reveals a harsh truth. The players do not care about the central pillar.
Oh, no, they hate it.
They just ignore it. Instead, they are entirely motivated by a secondary system the team barely even thought about.
That happens all the time.
So the leadership team, making a highly intelligent and adaptable choice, decides to pivot. They fundamentally alter that original feature to support this new emergent player behavior.
I mean, that is just smart development. You have to follow the fun.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So another 8 months pass.
Mm-hmm.
The game is now entering the final optimization phase.
Crunch time.
The technical directors realize that the game is running out of memory. The frame rate is tanking. To salvage the performance and ensure the game actually runs on the target hardware, the engineering team is forced to aggressively strip down and simplify that pivoted feature.
They just have to hack away at it.
It's a brutal but completely necessary technical compromise.
Right. Because if the game crashes, nobody cares how fun the feature was.
Exactly. Now, drop a brand new developer into the studio. They are hired, given a desk, and told to go work on this specific system. What do they actually see?
Oh, man.
They have no knowledge of the pristine original pillar. They weren't in the room when the playtest data forced a pivot. They didn't experience the panic of the performance optimization crunch.
They just see the aftermath.
They look at the code and the design logic, and all they see is a Frankenstein's monster. It looks utterly incoherent.
They must look at it and think, you know, what kind of incompetent amateurs built this thing?
That is the exact psychological trap. The system appears chaotic and poorly planned, but the reality is that it evolved through a sequence of highly rational, intelligent, and necessary decisions.
That is so tragic.
The tragedy isn't that bad choices were made. The tragedy is that the connective narrative explaining why those choices were made has completely evaporated.
The technical execution survived, but the story of the feature died.
Beautifully put.
How does that happen, though? Where does all that shared knowledge actually go if it's not captured in the official design documents?
It scatters. In the early days of a project, a small team can maintain a shared mental model purely through proximity.
Because they're all in the same room.
Exactly. The core vision is reinforced every single day during lunch breaks or just casual hallway conversations. But as the team scales from, say, 20 people to 200 people, that proximity vanishes.
You can't just yell across the room anymore.
And the velocity of iteration vastly outpaces the speed of documentation. The actual vital history of the project splinters into these isolated silos.
The source material refers to this as the project's dark matter, right?
Yes.
The invisible conversations that actually hold the universe together.
Precisely. The real story of why the game is shaped the way it is ends up buried in thousands of ephemeral direct messages on Slack.
Oh, Slack is where context goes to die.
It lives in passing hallway conversations that were never written down. It hides in wildly outdated internal wiki pages that no one has the time to maintain. And most dangerously, it relies on the fading, highly subjective memories of the senior staff.
Which brings us right back to our YouTube channel metaphor. The coherent picture of the game has been shattered into tens of thousands of unfavorable semicircle videos scattered all across the studio's communication channels.
Yeah.
And when developers are surrounded by fragments they don't understand, the source points out that they start asking the exact same questions over and over again.
Constant repetition.
Like, why was this feature cut? Why are we prioritizing this bug over that bug? Why is the roadmap changing again?
And when a developer asks those questions and meets a wall of silence, or even worse, gets a conflicting answer depending on who they ask, the perceived coherence of the entire enterprise just collapses.
They stop believing there's a plan at all.
Exactly.
Okay, if the backlog is a confusing archaeological dig site and the daily work feels like scattered static, teams usually rely on signposts to tell them they are moving in the right direction.
That's the theory.
Right. I'm talking about project milestones, alpha, beta, goldmaster. But the source argues that even these fail during this phase of fragmentation.
The text highlights the collapse of meaningful milestones as one of the primary drivers of studio burnout. It introduces a scenario that will honestly trigger a trauma response in many software engineers.
Oh boy.
The alpha problem.
This is such a classic trap. The document describes a studio approaching this massive date on the calendar called alpha, or maybe content lock. The problem is, if you walk the floor and ask 5 different leads what alpha actually means, you get 5 completely different answers.
It represents a total failure of structural communication. In a functional environment, a milestone is not a date.
Say that again?
A milestone is not a date. A milestone is an observable binary state of the project. It is a definition of what the software must be capable of demonstrating to prove that a specific set of risks has been mitigated.
It's a test you have to pass.
Exactly. It should draw a clear line in the sand regarding what problems are definitively solved.
But when that definition degrades, the milestone just becomes a terrifying word on a calendar that forces everyone to work weekends.
Just mandatory crunch.
The text points out that when milestones lose their descriptive power, the physical work still happens. People are still dragging tickets across a Kanban board.
Which, for those unfamiliar, is just a visual way of tracking tasks from to-do to doing to done.
Right. The columns are full of sticky notes, the builds are still compiling, but the milestone itself totally fails to communicate the actual shape of the game.
The visual the source uses here is brilliant. It describes the feeling of running on a treadmill in a pitch-dark room.
Oh, I hate that.
You are exhausted. Your heart rate is maxed out. You are exerting maximum effort. But because there are absolutely no visible landmarks, you have no idea if you're actually moving forward or just burning energy in place.
And the text identifies exactly when this treadmill feeling is most likely to destroy a team. It breaks the production cycle down into phases.
Let's walk through them.
So the early phase is the honeymoon. It's exploratory, it's a small team, it's highly creative. Everyone loves the early phase.
Everyone loves it.
Then the final phase is terrifying, but it has extreme clarity. You are entirely constrained by the reality of shipping the box. But between those two is the danger zone. The source calls it the messy middle.
The messy middle. The middle phase of development is where the volume of parallel work reaches its absolute peak.
Maximum chaos.
You have maximum headcount executing across every single discipline simultaneously. And because there is so much concurrent activity, and because the final constraining deadlines are still just far enough away to feel abstract, the middle phase is where the risk of total irreversible fragmentation is highest.
So what does this all mean? If a studio finds itself deep in the messy middle, their backlog is an unreadable mess of ancient decisions, their milestones are just arbitrary calendar dates, and the daily work looks like blinking pixels, is the game doomed?
It feels doomed.
Right. Has the project actually lost its creative direction?
This is perhaps the most important analytical distinction in the entire document. The source firmly asserts that this sensation of chaos does not inherently mean the project has lost its direction.
Okay, that's a relief.
It means the direction has ceased to be observable.
Observable. Let me make sure I'm grasping that. The map hasn't burned up. The team is just trying to read it in the dark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To return to our central metaphor, if you pause one of those unfavorable semicircle videos and you are staring at a flat brown screen, the larger, complex image is still mathematically encoded in the data of the channel.
It's there?
It exists. It hasn't vanished just because you, the observer, cannot perceive it from your current vantage point. The structure is there. It is just unobservable.
The disease is invisible structure.
Perfectly said.
And if that is the disease, we really need to talk about the cure. We need to talk about how a studio actually turns the lights back on. And this is where the source document takes a fascinating turn, because it points to a very specific, often completely misunderstood discipline as the ultimate cure.
Production.
Production.
Yes. The text essentially writes a manifesto redefining the true purpose of the project management and production disciplines.
This is vital, because I think the perception of a producer or a project manager, both inside and outside the tech industry, is heavily skewed toward purely operational administrative tasks.
Oh, entirely.
People picture someone with a clipboard and a stopwatch. The person who updates the spreadsheets, badgers the engineers in morning stand-up meetings, and just ensures the burn-down charts look pretty. A pure administrator.
And to be fair to producers, those operational tasks are totally necessary. You have to maintain the basic velocity of the team.
Sure, somebody has to do the paperwork.
But the document argues aggressively that if a producer views those administrative chores as their primary job, they are failing.
Wow, strong words.
The actual deeper existential function of production is the preservation of structure. Their fundamental purpose is to ensure that the massive flood of fragmented work continues to push the project in a coherent, visible direction.
To explain how they do this, the source introduces the concept of operational windows, which I think perfectly captures the reality of specialized labor.
It is a phenomenal framework. Everyone on the development team experiences the creation of the game through a highly restrictive, specialized lens. That is their operational window.
Let's break that down. Consider the environment artist. They spend their entire day looking out a window framed by texture resolutions, polygon budgets, lighting bakes, and visual composition.
That is their whole reality.
That is their reality. Meanwhile, the systems designer is looking out a completely different window. They are staring at spreadsheets, dictating drop rates, damage values, economic loops, and player retention metrics.
A very different view.
And the network programmer is looking at a window made of packet loss, server latency, and bandwidth constraints.
They're all working on the exact same product, but their daily realities have almost zero overlap.
None.
They're essentially looking out windows on completely different sides of the building.
And here is where the producer fits into this architecture. Where is their window?
The insight of the text is that the producer does not have an operational window.
Wait, really?
In fact, a producer is one of the only roles in the entire studio that is structurally required to exist in the intersection of everyone else's windows.
So they are the person standing in the dead center of the room, just spinning around, trying to look out of all the windows simultaneously.
Their mandate is to maintain a systemic, holistic view of the project. They cannot afford to get lost in the minutia of the polygon count or the specific syntax of the networking code.
If they do, they fail.
Right. Their job is to use systems and tools to preserve the overarching perspective.
They are the internet sleuths.
Yes.
The producer is the person sitting in the Discord server of the studio. Their entire function is to take the blinking pixel of the programmer's refactor ticket, combine it with the brown screen of the designer's economy tweak, stitch it together with the distorted audio of the QA tester's bug report, and actually assemble the mosaic.
They find the hidden picture.
And crucially, they hold that picture up so the rest of the team can see it.
When a production team successfully executes this, the entire psychological atmosphere of a studio transforms. The individual tasks that felt like random noise suddenly regain their narrative context.
That must be a huge relief.
Let's look back at that designer who was furious about having to change a mechanic that was locked months ago.
The one who felt like they were breaking their own game.
Right. If production has maintained structural visibility, that change request isn't a chaotic interruption anymore. The designer actually understands that playtest data showed a severe drop-off in player engagement, and this tweak is a surgical adjustment to save the game's pacing.
They know why they're doing it.
Exactly.
The sticky notes sliding under the doors suddenly have a compass attached to them. A ticket in the backlog isn't just a chore designed to punish you. It is a vital, logical step toward proving the next phase of the game actually works.
So the theoretical philosophy is clear. The producer is the architect of context.
I love that phrase, architect of context.
But the source material doesn't just leave us with theory. It provides highly pragmatic, concrete methodologies for achieving this. If you were listening to this right now and you manage a team, literally any team, not just software, the text outlines 3 specific mechanisms of visibility.
Before we dive into the nuts and bolts of how to fix a failing project, the author includes a really critical disclaimer about these 3 methods.
Yes, the author emphasizes that none of these mechanisms are technologically advanced. We are not talking about implementing cutting-edge AI predictive modeling or buying massive new enterprise software suites.
Thank goodness.
The magic of these tools lies entirely in the consistency of their application. It is the rigorous, religious execution of basic communication over a long period of time.
Let's get into it. The first mechanism of visibility is shifting from date-driven tracking to intent-driven roadmaps.
Crucial shift.
We talked earlier about how milestones degrade into arbitrary dates. A traditional broken roadmap basically says, the combat system must be finished by October 1st.
It's just a deadline attached to a noun.
Exactly.
An intent-driven roadmap fundamentally changes the sentence structure of project planning. It forces leadership to articulate the what and the why.
How does that look in practice?
A proper roadmap communicates the specific capability the project aims to unlock and exactly why that capability is necessary for the next phase of evaluation.
So instead of just saying combat by October 1st, an intent-driven roadmap says, by October 1st, the player must be able to seamlessly chain 3 melee attacks together into a finisher so that we can validate if the core engagement loop feels satisfying enough to keep them playing for an hour.
Consider how that changes the workflow for the developer on the ground. You aren't just writing code to meet an arbitrary deadline anymore. You are writing code to answer a specific design-critical question.
It gives it a point.
It gives every task related to that system a clear, overarching, verifiable purpose.
The second mechanism is designed specifically to cure that terrifying archaeological dig site we call the backlog. It's called preserving decision history.
This is arguably the most neglected practice in modern corporate environments, period. It is the implementation of a rigorous, centralized decision log.
And again, the actual execution is shockingly simple. The text outlines a format that is basically just 4 columns on a spreadsheet. Date, owner, reasoning, expected impact.
The simplicity is the point.
Right.
Let's return to our hypothetical new hire staring at that Frankenstein system that was modified for playtests and then stripped down for memory performance.
The poor developer who thought everyone was incompetent.
Right. If the studio maintains a decision log, that developer doesn't have to engage in digital archaeology. They don't have to guess at the motivations of ghosts. They simply open the log and read the history.
So they see the entry from March. It says creative director changed currency drop rates because playtests showed players were hoarding items. Expected impact is a 15% increase in item usage. And then they see the entry from August. Lead engineer disabled secondary particle effects on currency drops due to memory leaks on the console dev kits. Expected impact is a stable 30 frames per second.
The mystery evaporates instantly. The evolution of the system transforms from a source of profound confusion and resentment into a logical, perfectly documented journey.
It just makes sense.
Countless hours of reverse engineering and frustrated Slack messages are entirely prevented because a leader took literally 4 minutes to document the why behind a major pivot.
It turns the strata of the dig site into a clearly curated museum exhibit.
Which brings us to the third and final mechanism, real milestones. This is the direct counterattack against the alpha problem we talked about earlier.
The treadmill in the dark.
Yes. The fix for the milestone problem requires ruthless discipline from leadership. A milestone must be reclaimed from the calendar and tethered to physical reality.
What does that mean, tethered to physical reality?
It must describe a tangible state of the product that can be undeniably demonstrated.
Okay. So if the milestone is called first playable, you don't achieve it just because it's Friday at 5 p.m. You achieve it when someone can actually pick up a controller, press start, and play the game for 5 minutes without it crashing.
Exactly that. It cannot be a theoretical state. It serves as a forced synchronization point for the entire studio.
Everyone has to look at the same thing.
Right. It is the moment where everyone puts down their tools, steps back from their individual operational windows, and evaluates the composite image. It is the mechanism that proves whether or not the thousands of fragmented tasks actually resulted in forward momentum.
When a production team successfully implements all three of these anchors, when the roadmap is driven by intent, the history of decisions is completely transparent, and milestones demand tangible proof. The entire psychology of the floor shifts.
The feeling of drowning in noise recedes.
Developers stop shouting into the void because the context is structurally woven into their daily workflow.
The source observes that under these specific conditions, a team can actually survive the frantic, hyper-iterative chaos of the messy middle. Tasks that in a broken system would look like arbitrary static become instantly recognizable as critical, logical steps toward an observable goal.
It's basically like having a script running in the background of the studio that automatically downloads all those bizarre YouTube fragments and stitches them into a beautiful, coherent landscape every single morning.
It really is. But the text also provides a pretty grim warning. Without the rigorous application of these mechanisms, the project's backlog will inevitably decay into a chaotic archive of partially remembered mandates.
Yeah, bad old days.
The studio will regress. They will find themselves right back where they started, staring at a flood of activity without any discernible pattern.
Wow. We've covered incredible ground today. We started by looking at one of the weirdest artifacts on the internet, a YouTube channel from 2015 that bombarded the world with blinking pixels, brown screens, and distorted noise.
Unfavorable semicircle.
Right. And we use the community's effort to decode unfavorable semicircle as a lens to understand the absolute chaos of massive, multidisciplinary project management.
Good, perfect parallel.
We've explored how a lack of connective context turns really smart decisions into baffling mysteries. And we've completely redefined the role of a producer from just a clipboard-holding administrator to the essential architect of meaning who actually pieces the mosaic together.
As we conclude the analysis of this source material, there is a brilliant, almost tragic irony embedded in the text that serves as the ultimate takeaway here.
I think I know where you're going with this. Let's hear it.
When a development team is at its absolute lowest point, when the project feels like a swirling vortex of meaningless, chaotic activity, when developers are burning out because nothing makes sense, the underlying structural pattern almost always still exists.
That is the ultimate twist. The order is there. The game isn't actually broken.
The creative directors and the executive producers usually know exactly what the game is supposed to be. They can see the pattern clearly in their own minds.
Right, they see the painting.
But the profound failure is believing that a well-structured plan inside the head of a director is sufficient to stabilize a production. It creates a lethal illusion of order.
Lethal illusion. Wow.
The leadership team assumes everything is progressing fine because they possess the context. But true, functional order requires structural clarity for every single person touching the product. Having a brilliant pattern is entirely useless if you fail to maintain its visibility.
If the environment artist or the QA tester cannot see the structure, then to them, the structure does not exist. It is just noise.
Exactly.
This entire deep dive is proof that immense, profound meaning can absolutely exist across a system of fragments that, when viewed individually, appear totally meaningless. But that meaning only survives if someone is doing the relentless, unglamorous work of connecting the dots.
It really forces us to reevaluate how we communicate in our professional lives. True communication is never just the raw transmission of data.
No, it's not.
It is the active sharing of the context that makes the data actionable.
That brings us to the end of our intellectual journey today. But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought.
A little homework.
Exactly. We've spent the last hour talking about internet sleuths, decoding YouTube videos, and game developers fighting through the messy middle of multi-million-dollar productions. But the core truth of this applies to all of us, literally regardless of our industry.
It's human nature.
Look at your own daily grind. Look at the tasks that frustrate you, the endless emails, the shifting priorities. If the feeling of chaos in your work isn't actually a lack of order, but simply an inability to see the broader pattern, what invisible picture might you be completely missing right now simply because you are standing 1 inch away from the canvas, staring at a single blinking pixel?
That is a question that requires stepping back to answer.
Take that step back, look for the pattern, and keep diving deep.
If this is useful, subscribe.
New breakdowns every week.